Bangladesh is second only to China in producing clothing for the world.
Textile is one of the key economic sectors for us in Bangladesh because it brings almost 80% of our foreign currency.
It has been one of the primary engines of growth in the nation of 164 million people. The industry earns more than $35 billion a year from exports and employs 4 million people, a large majority of whom are women.
Hi everybody! In the 1950s, right after its independence, Bangladesh was one of the poorest countries in the world. And from our previous video, you already know that in the past 50 years, Bangladesh has gone from being a poverty-infected country with a poverty rate of 80% to becoming one of the fastest growing countries in the world with a GDP of $400 billion and a poverty rate of less than 12%. And one of the most important reasons for this growth is the textile revolution of Bangladesh, because of which this country went from being a no one to becoming the second largest ready-made garment exporter in the world. In fact, from 2011 to 2019, Bangladesh textile export has more than doubled from just $14.6 billion in 2011 to $33.1 billion in 2019. And even in 2020, they exported $28 billion worth of garments. And all of this happened because of the extraordinary policies implemented by the government of Bangladesh. So the question is, what were these policies? How did they turn Bangladesh into the second largest exporter of ready-made garments? And most importantly, what are the study materials to help you understand the incredible rise of Bangladesh? This video is brought to you by Wint, but more on this at the end of the video. So, let's start from the basics. Now, if you remember from our Sri Lanka episode, if an underdeveloped nation wants to grow, what are the steps? Number 1, identify an important asset within the country. Number 2, use that asset to create value in the global economy. Number 3, then create a strong clientele for cash flow. Number 4, use this cash flow to create more assets and then add more value to the global economy, and then the cycle will keep continuing. In case of Dubai, they identified oil, sold it to the world, made money, then expanded to maritime trade facilities. Then they made money again and then built their business ecosystems. But in case of Bangladesh, the case was a little different. You see, when you've got an asset like oil, which is not available elsewhere in large quantities, you can actually command a price tag over your asset and then make money. In this case, the Middle Eastern countries actually formed something called the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, as in a formal cartel. And using this cartel, they actually started commanding the price that they want. As a result, endless amount of money actually flooded into the Middle East. But in case of Bangladesh, their asset was cheap labor, because ever since independence, the Bangladeshis did not get any opportunity to find jobs at home. So in case of labor, the catch is that you are always in competition with a rival to grab the opportunity. In this case, Bangladesh was in direct competition with none other than China itself. To tell you about it, in 1978, the Chinese had just opened up their economy and they literally became the manufacturing hub of the world for not just textile but every other industry. Now usually if you take any industry, they do not generally rely on just one country but diversify their outsourcing into different countries for manufacturing. This is done so that in case if one country gets into trouble like Russia did or like Pakistan did, then their operation would not be entirely halted. In case of the textile industry, companies like Zara or other companies usually outsource their projects to countries like China, Vietnam, Indonesia, Cambodia and Bangladesh. Now during the 1980s and 90s, China was hands down the leader of manufacturing, and because of its ultra cheap labor cost, they were by far the first preference for any country to set up their manufacturing unit. But during that time, even Bangladesh was slowly and steadily improving, and they did everything in their capacity to build a conducive business ecosystem in Bangladesh. And in order to do that, they brought in some incredible policies that addressed 3 of the most critical problems faced by the businessmen in Bangladesh. The first of this problem was the unavailability of credit to buy machinery, which means if a businessman is just starting up and he needs machinery worth 50 to 60 lakhs, the banking system was too rigid to offer these loans to businessmen, even if they had a sure shot at profit. Secondly, even after this machinery is paid for, the import duty was another big barrier. In this case, even if a low import duty of 5% is applied on a machinery worth 10 crores, that itself is 50 lakhs of import duty. And this was a big entry barrier for any businessman to start his business. And lastly, there was infrastructure issue, as in, even if your factory is completely built, if there are frequent power shortages, then it leads to loss in productivity. If you do not have good highways in your country, then it leads to logistic issues, which again causes losses. These were the three critical problems that were being faced by the businessmen of Bangladesh, because of which they were not able to start a business, because of which they were not able to employ more people. As a result, the economy itself was taking a hit. This is when the Bangladesh government actually realized that they have to do something if they want to grow and progress. This is when the Bangladeshi government actually came up with three incredible policies that changed the face of Bangladesh forever. The question is, what were these policies and how did they suddenly change the face of Bangladesh? Well, the first policy the Bangladeshi government came up with was something called back-to-back letter of credit system. Now let's try to understand how this works using a simple story. Let's say there is a company A, that is a company in the US and sells heavy textile machinery. Company B is a trading firm that is based in India and has learned that company C in Bangladesh wants to purchase heavy machinery worth 5 crore rupees. So if you see in this arrangement, the buyer wants to buy, the seller wants to sell, and the broker wants to make money. But the problem over here is that the US company does not trust company C in Bangladesh because it is an underdeveloped nation and any political or communal rift might actually put 5 crore rupees at risk. But you see, the Indian broker B wants to ensure that the trade is made so that he receives his commission. So here's where the back-to-back letter of credit comes in handy. What happens in this strategy is that Company C will go to a reputed financial institution in Bangladesh and get it to issue something called the letter of credit with broker B as the beneficiary. So basically, the bank in Bangladesh tells the Indian broker, don't worry, I will make the payment of 5 crore with 20 lakhs in commission to you on behalf of Company C. And now that the broker has an assurance from a reputed bank, he will take that letter of credit to go to his reputed bank in India and ask them to issue another letter of credit to Company A in the US. So here's where the Indian bank assures the American company that the bank will pay the company 5 crore rupees on behalf of the broker. So now Company A feels safe about the Indian bank paying them money, and now they ship their heavy machinery knowing that once the transaction is complete, it will be paid by the Indian bank. So at the end of the day, the broker is also assured about being paid by the Bangladeshi bank and the American company is assured about being paid by the Indian bank. So this way, the credit risk has been removed from the transaction and all the parties have been benefited. This made it extremely easy for the Bangladeshi businessmen to actually set up their textile manufacturing business. Eventually, that ended up giving jobs to millions of people in Bangladesh. And this is where the second policy came in. Now, if you look at the above example, you will see that if the Bangladeshi businessman is imposed with an import duty of just 5%, then he has to pay 25 lakh rupees in taxes alone. But at the same time, if the Bangladeshi government decides to do away with the import duty, then the government will lose out on a significant amount of income. So here's where the Bangladeshi government came up with a policy innovation called the policy of duty drawback facilities through bonded warehouses. If Sham wants to import his machinery, raw materials and replacements without import duty, then all the finished products that he produces using these materials must be kept in bonded warehouses wherein the product must compulsorily be used for exports only. And this is checked by the Special Customs Authority who actually check the import and export containers going to and from the bonded factory. This way, the Bangladeshi government is able to provide ease of business for the businessmen who are exporting the products, and at the same time, they do not lose out on the import duty income for all the domestic products. And lastly, in spite of all the political instability, Bangladesh has improved its infrastructure and connectivity by a large extent, and they have done that through transportation and logistics improvement. This is how Bangladesh had been laying its foundation since 30 years, from 1971 to 2001. And here's where the tables started turning. From early 2000s onwards, the Chinese labor cost started increasing. In fact, by 2012, the cost of labor in China was so high as compared to Bangladesh that it had reached around $400 to $500 per month per worker. And in Bangladesh, during the same time, the average monthly salary for garment worker was only $70 to $100 per month per worker. So let alone Europe and US, even the Chinese factories started outsourcing their work to Bangladeshi factories. Now the question over here is, why only Bangladesh? Why not Indonesia or Cambodia? Well, the simple answer for that is that Bangladesh was fully equipped with infrastructure and workers to embrace the opportunity that was at its doorstep. While Indonesia had 2,450 factories in 2012, Vietnam had 2,000, Cambodia had 260, whereas Bangladesh alone had 5,000 RNG factories with a workforce of 3.6 million workers or 36 lakh workers. As a result, if you look at the growth of Bangladesh textile export, you will see that from 2011 to 2019, Bangladesh textile export more than doubled from $14.6 billion in 2011 to $33.1 billion in 2019. And even during the pandemic, they exported $28 billion worth of ready-made garments. This is how, by identifying a rising industry, by creating a conducive business ecosystem with policy innovation, and most importantly, by laying a foundational infrastructure for an upcoming opportunity, Bangladesh today stands as one of the fastest growing countries in the world. And just to give you a reality check, Bangladesh's story is not a fairy tale at all, and it also has some very dark sides that you never want to experience.
As the textile industry continues to grow, the situation looks set to get worse.
The Bangladesh government says it's doing all it can to crack down on child labour, but there is little evidence of that in this factory.
Environmental experts say unplanned development, coal-run industries, brick factories and construction works have made the situation worse.
Textiles industries produce around 56 billion litres of contaminated water a year.
Islamist groups are increasingly demanding a state founded on Islamic law. In recent years, dozens of freethinkers, secular activists, members of religious minorities, and outsiders have been killed by radical Islamists.
We wonder what future awaits Bangladesh.
These are about hazardous working conditions that have led to horrific accidents, child labor that is ruining the life of thousands of children, and the systematic persecution of Hindus which is hidden in plain sight. And lastly, the biggest threat for Bangladesh is that all of these policy innovations have been so focused on textile industry that now the country has actually become over dependent on just one sector, wherein the RMG sector alone accounts for more than 80% of their total export revenue as of 2021. So if anything happens to this industry, the country is again going to collapse into an economic crisis. And this brings me to the most important part of the episode, and that are the study materials to help you understand the different dimensions of the rise of Bangladesh. Before we move on, I want to thank our partners Wint for supporting our content. For full disclosure, even thinkschool is an investor in Wint. Wint is a platform by which you can invest in bonds of leading NBFCs with strong backers and earn 9 to 11% returns. Now, most of you might be investing into the stock market as a long-term investor, but if you want to make steady returns for a short-term goal, that's where Wint assets can come in handy. The investment process is super simple. You can see the asset page over here. This contains detailed information about the asset, and on the right-hand side, you can see a table by which you can determine how many units of the bond you want to buy. And once you decide upon the number of units, the payment process is also super easy. You can pay via UPI, net banking, or even the Wint fund. And that's it, you're done. By investing in Wint you can earn returns that are higher than FDs and at the same time not as volatile as stocks. But always remember, you must also check out all the risks explained on their website before deciding on your investment. Wint is backed by Zerodha's Rainmatter, Kunal Shah, who's the CEO of Cred, and many more reputed investors. And you can check them out from the special link in the description. Moving on to the study materials, the first thing I'm attaching is a McKinsey report of both 2012 and 2021. This is a detailed analysis of the RMG sector of Bangladesh. Secondly, there is this wonderful study done by Brookings that actually outlines the efforts taken by the country to achieve this extraordinary growth of the RMG sector. And lastly, I am attaching a short note on both back-to-back letter of credit system and bonded warehousing, which will help you understand these concepts better. And if there are any other study materials that I find to be interesting, I'll attach all of them in the same list. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button and to make YouTube Baba happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.